First reading, a bill for an act to establish a commission of inquiry into anti-Semitism at Australian universities and for related purposes.
The call to member for Barara.
Mr Speaker, I move that this bill be now read a second time. Today, Australia faces its greatest threat to multiculturalism with the emergence of anti-Semitism, in particular the studied indifference to Jew hatred on our campuses. Jewish staff and students are abandoned by those charged with creating a safe place for students to study and for staff to research, teach and work. This is a tragedy for Australia, which, unlike almost anywhere else, has been so welcoming to the Jewish people. From the days of the First Fleet, when a dozen Jewish convicts stumbled ashore at Sydney Cove, Jewish people have had the opportunity to thrive free from discrimination and hatred. With that freedom and opportunity, Jewish Australians have contributed to this country. Our job in this place is to ensure that all Australians enjoy the right to an education free of harassment and intimidation. Our job is to ensure that the next generation of Jewish students are not discouraged from entering any field of Australian life. There's a particular tragedy about campus anti-Semitism which seeks to exclude Jews from the intellectual life of this nation, because the Jewish tradition values education as one of the highest virtues. Jews are taught to have arguments for the sake of heaven, to arrive at truth through debate and discussion. This is the essence of a university. At their best, universities are life-changing places where people get an education and improve their opportunities in life. It's where the next generation of leaders is formed. And that's why it's so important that anti-Semitism doesn't take hold. It's why students need to be taught about the evils of anti-Semitism. It's why it's always important to reject anti-Semitism however it manifests. And it's why it's not okay to be a bystander. If we're not teaching this to the next generation, then we're setting our society on a course for a future based on conspiracy, not fact, on othering, not personal responsibility, on social discord, not social harmony. It's for this reason that addressing anti-Semitism on campus is so important, because what happens on campus today sets the tone for the Australia of tomorrow. As a parent, I want my children to have the same educational opportunities I did, but I'm concerned about what today's Jewish students are telling me. Today, young Jewish Australians who are taking their first steps in the adult world are facing unprecedented levels of anti-Semitism. The next generation of contributors are turning up to university open days, to lectures, to university lawns and being met with a clear message that Jews are not welcome. But I say enough. We should not accept that in Australia. The anti-Semitism we're seeing on campuses is not new. It goes back years. In August 2023, 2 months before the Hamas terrorist attacks, the Australian Jewish University Experience Survey revealed that 64% of Jewish university students had experienced anti-Semitism on campus. 57% of Jewish students had hidden the fact they were Jewish. 19% had stayed away from campus because of anti-Semitism. And when anti-Semitism occurred, 61% who made a complaint were dissatisfied with the outcome. In 2022, the member for McNamara, the member for Wentworth and I, as co-chairs of the Parliamentary Friends of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, wrote to Australian universities to ask them to adopt the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. The IHRA definition should not be controversial. We emphasise that legitimate criticisms of the State of Israel do not amount to anti-Semitism under the definition. That definition has multi-partisan support. But unfortunately, only 5 of the 39 universities have signed up. And while anti-Semitism was already a problem before the 7th of October, since that time it's been off the charts. We've seen encampments where students chanting Intifada and River to the Sea are deciding who should be allowed to access university buildings because of their religion, and other stories which are deeply troubling, like the student living in on-campus accommodation who held a Shabbat dinner for both Jewish and non-Jewish students at her college. It had nothing to do with the Israel-Hamas war. It was simply an opportunity to gather for a meal and share her traditions. But the following morning, that student woke up to find Palestinian flags shoved under her door. At another university, a Jewish student wearing a kippah was walking through campus. He had to walk through a pro-Palestine gathering to get to where he was going. One of the people from the gathering approached him and asked, "Do you support the murdering of babies and genocide in the Middle East?" And there are multiple stories of Jewish students being spat on and taunted with swastikas. And it's happening to Jewish staff too. In one instance, an expat Israeli staff member's working area was urinated on and the word resign scribbled on her desk. The message in these stories is Jews are not welcome here. And it's not just students and outside activists propagating this stuff, it's professors and PhDs. We've seen academics say that Jews don't deserve cultural safety. And last week, we saw another academic deny that the rapes on the 7th of October even occurred. Hamas deniers are no different than Holocaust deniers. But for academics, in places of learning and truth, to deny the truth of human testimony and history is to make a mockery of their mission. What we're seeing on Australian university campuses today is the next evolution of a hatred that has endured throughout human history. Long before October 7, universities were failing to take anti-Semitism seriously and to act to protect Jewish students in the way that they protect other minorities on campus. But now we see vice-chancellors negotiating research contracts with protesters, university encampments allowed to run and fester, universities unwilling and unable to evict professional agitators from the far left and people carrying jihadi flags, Jewish students harassed and intimidated in lectures and tutorials, student learning and staff teaching disrupted by protesters, complaints mechanisms that are mere tick-the-box exercises, vice-chancellors implying that hate-fuelled protests are just the price Jewish students have to pay for free speech, and a collective statement from 39 university chancellors which was so weak it didn't even mention the words Jew or anti-Semitism. Now, I don't believe that university leaders are anti-Semitic, but I do believe they are willfully blind. One chilling aspect of this willful blindness is their failure to acknowledge the anti-Semitic nature of From the River to the Sea. Imagine if a terrorist group in our country committed terrible crimes and people started chanting, "From the Indian Ocean to the Pacific, Australia will be free of," and insert the name of the religion, the political affiliation, the sexuality, any aspect of identity that the terrorists might want to eradicate. That's what the phrase "river to the sea" means. Right. It's a statement of intent to violently annihilate Jewish people from the land of Israel. From the river to the sea is a line that sends a chill because it's spoken by murderers and parroted by people who know no better. But the vice-chancellors of our universities do know better, and that's why their complicity is such a problem. That's why we need a judicial inquiry into their systemic failures on the issues. This bill, Mr Speaker, provides for the establishment of a commission of inquiry with Royal Commission powers, led by a current or former judge, to inquire into anti-Semitism on university campuses. The inquiry will examine incidents of anti-Semitic activity on campus both before and after the 7th of October. It will consider whether the response of university leaders, regulators, representative organisations and others has been adequate. Among other things, it will examine whether the universities adequately define and recognise the modern manifestations of anti-Semitism and whether they've put in place appropriate policy responses to prevent it, reject it and deal with it. It will examine university policies and their enforcement, including complaints handling and disciplinary policies, security arrangements and university powers to expel people from campus for anti-Semitic activity. It will examine what steps universities are taking to ensure course materials and what's actually delivered during lectures and tutorials do not include anti-Semitic conduct. And it will make recommendations on institution-specific and sector-wide policy, regulatory and legislative changes, including education programs, disciplinary sanctions and ministerial intervention. This bill and its powers are based on the bill which established the 2007 equine influenza inquiry. A judicial inquiry is crucial to ensure that the rise of anti-Semitism on our campuses can be effectively investigated. A judicial inquiry is the most authoritative form of inquiry. Led by an independent, respected jurist with full investigatory powers, assisted by skilled cross-examiners, the inquiry could hear evidence confidentially without witnesses feeling reprisals. Such an inquiry provides the best chance to ensure anti-Semitism on campus, a long-running cultural problem which is a serious concern for social cohesion in this country, is properly addressed. The government's proposal for an inquiry led by the Human Rights Commission into various forms of racism on campus is woefully inadequate. It has neither the independence, nor the powers, nor the personnel to deal with these matters. The AHRC has proven itself to be unready and unwilling to respond to anti-Semitism in Australia, despite a 738% increase in anti-Semitic incidents since the 7th of October. The AHRC has sat on its hands, or worse. Jewish Australians simply do not have faith in an inquiry led by the AHRC, and this bill, by contrast, has the support of the Jewish community. It's tempting to think of anti-Semitism as the domain of the uneducated, but history tells us that is not the case. History tells us that anti-Semitism also lives in the minds of society's best educated. More than half the people that attended the Wannsee conference that developed the final solution were doctors or had PhDs. And this bill is about ensuring we never get to that point. It was Martin Luther King who said, "In the end, we remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." And Peter Dutton who said, "Wherever and whenever the forces of anti-Semitism are on the march, there's a need for moral courage and moral clarity." Today I call on the government to show moral courage and moral clarity by adopting this bill and allowing it to be brought on for debate.